Test. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream, to this meeting of the Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee at Newshire Hall in Alconbury. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, but could I please ask that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. I would remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm does sound, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. So item 1, would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Dieter and Councillor Bradnam is here as a sub. Councillor Levine, Councillor Christine Whelan is here as a sub. Councillor Lowe and Councillor Stephen Fisher.
Thank you for that. So item 2, minutes of 16th of October 2025, and we are asked to approve the minutes of this last committee meeting as a correct record. Can I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of these minutes? Okay, I see no objection. So on that basis, we will take those as approved. Do officers or members have any comments on the action log? Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Just one update. So all of the actions were completed bar one in point 17. And just to confirm that the report that's referenced regarding the detail around recruitment and retainment of staff in the EDI policy, that has been circulated today. So that action is now closed.
Thank you. Members, any comments at all? Okay. Thank you for that, in which case we'll move on to item 3, which is public questions and petitions, but we have not received any for today's meeting. So we will move on to item 4. And the first item is the business plan and budget for 26-29, which will be presented by the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, Frank Jordan, and the Executive Director of Finance and Resources, Michael Hudson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, members. First of all, I'll introduce myself to this committee. So I'm Frank Jordan, the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability. And members will note that Community Resilience and Development now forms part of the Place and Sustainability Directorate, which is why, as the Exec Director, I'll be presenting the business plan to this committee. So the purpose of the report is for all members of the committee to scrutinise the draft business plan proposals for 26-27. It's set up to enable you to scrutinise the proposals, seek clarifications and assurances regarding them. And it also enables you as a committee to provide feedback, advice or recommendations on the proposals before they're considered by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 29th of January, who'll be making the final recommendation to full council when that's considered in terms of setting the budget in the business plan for the council. I'm also joined today by Michael Hudson as the Executive Director of Finance and Resources, and we have officers from the Directorate and from Finance who can assist in any of the questions or clarifications you wish to raise today. So what we will do as well, myself and Michael will take notes based on your questions or clarifications. And at the end, I'll sum up and advise the Chair on what I think your recommendations or your suggestions or your feedback to Strategy and Resources Committee would be, just to check that we've got the right understanding of that. And then, Chair, you can then determine the final position that you want to present to committee. So we'll go into the report. So the report summarises the business plan that was draft in terms of draft business plan. It was the business plan that was considered by Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 11th of December. And in particular, what we've outlined in this report is the key issues that relate to this committee. And the report is structured as follows, and I think it's helpful for the committee to actually consider the different elements of it and provide feedback. So in the business plan, in addition to the financial matters, we also have what's called a strategic framework. And that strategic framework has been reviewed by the administration. And you'll see in section 1, it provides a revised strategic framework with a revised vision and revised ambitions and ambition priorities, which are still in draft form, and for the committee to consider and provide advice back to the committee, either Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. In particular, for this committee, I would highlight the changes with particular references and linkages with the ambition relating to fairness and opportunity wherever we can. Also, the other thing we just highlight is that each year we undertake a quality of life survey, which is an extensive survey, and the changes in the draft vision and the strategic framework are based on some of the feedback we've had from the quality of life survey. And in particular, in relation to this committee, we've particularly taken account of the feedback we've had around residents' concerns about health, well-being, economic issues, and the cost of living crisis. So that's the first part. Section 2, which if there are questions, be more for Michael to cover, but we provide in that section an overview of the corporate financial position. And it is worth noting at the time of presenting the position on the 11th of December, the draft business plan still outlined a funding gap of 6.4 million. However, that was before the draft local government settlement was received, which was received after the committee met. It was received just before Christmas. This is now being received and is currently being reviewed. And an update on that will be set. Will be provided to Strategy Resources Performance, but Michael will probably advise that it's very likely that he'll be recommending that based on that settlement that we can achieve a balanced budget position for 26-27. Then section 3 goes into more of the update and the contribution that the Directorate and the services in particular that relate to this committee, how that supports the delivery of the Council ambitions and the proposals around the budget and business plan. So in doing that, the report particularly highlights that the new division called Community Development Resilience covers both universal services that are available for all members of the community, such as libraries, as well as very, very specific targeted services to support communities when they face the most significant challenges. So we have services like libraries, adult education skills, the communities team, and the domestic violence support services. So a very broad range of very important services. The other thing we highlight in the report is that in 25-26 and for previous years, there was specific funding that was allocated to support some of our priorities through the Household Support Fund, but in the local government settlement, that has stopped. However, a new ring-fence grant was also allocated to local government called the Crisis and Resilience Fund, which has been introduced to all local authorities. The details have only just been published and still need to be confirmed. And we still need to go through a detailed delivery plan of the Crisis and Resilience Fund. We will bring a detailed delivery plan for that to committee in due course, but I think it's just worth noting that funding is available. However, I think the thing I would highlight, it's not a simple replacement of the Household Support Fund, and some of the criteria and the conditions on that grant are different. And I think particular shift of the Crisis Resilience Fund is to focus more on prevention. Linked to that, and given what was said around the quality of life survey and the particular concerns from the communities around cost of living, economic issues, personal financial matters, I think the most significant proposal that's before the committee today is the fact that in the draft business plan, there's a proposed investment of £1.7 million. And I'll just highlight that there's an error at paragraph 3.6, which says £1.5 million in relation to this. It's actually correct at paragraph 4.4. So there's £1.7 million, which is around anti-poverty measures, which takes account in particular the feedback we got from the Independent Poverty Commission. And this will retain capacity within the council to coordinate anti-poverty work. I'll oversee delivery of the Crisis Resilience Fund that I've already highlighted. And also particularly the main focus is support income maximisation for families who most need it, and to enable grants to community-based approaches to tackle poverty. So that's probably the most significant element of these business plan proposals. It's also worth noting that this capital investment that continues and the Libraries Plus programme is continuing, and it continues with the business plan. And the main focus of the Libraries Plus programme is to do two things, is to continue to improve the quality of the library service, but as the library service is one of those key assets in our communities, to use it as the basis for as much resident-focused interaction as we can possibly manage through our libraries estate. So that programme continues as well. We also have the regulatory side of the services. So the Directorate also provides support to the coroner, trading standards and registration services. There's been two particular issues we'd highlight here. Is that, first of all, I think committee is aware, it's to be noted that up until the end of 25-26, the service has been delivered through a delegation and collaboration agreement with Peterborough, where effectively the County Council has delegated the responsibility for trading standards to Peterborough. Peterborough have given us notice that they'd like that arrangement to cease, and that will end at the end of March. So from the 1st of April, the County Council will be solely responsible for trading standards within the county area, and will have to therefore have a service in place. We have got a draft budget in place for that, but we would just highlight that it's a risk because until we've actually got all the transfer of resources and understand exactly the full extent of what would be required for a standalone service, there may be additional costs. So we therefore put pressure funding in the draft business plan to cover some of that. But we still note that could only be confirmed in 26-27 once we finalise the implementation. So those are the key ones, but table 3.2 provides a summary of the key savings proposals as well. Particular savings proposals relate to review of structures within community resilience and development and a reduction in the library stock fund as well. And I previously outlined capital investment is also part of the business plan. So at 310, it just outlines that capital investment of £1 million is included in the programme. But the full details of all of the proposals are in Appendix 1. So, and then the final thing for committees to consider, and this is something that all executive directors need to do as well, is that we do, as part of our budget, we have quite significant income as part of the council's budget, and therefore each year we reset the fees, and that's typically based on inflationary rates. So we are required to, before we make a decision on fees and charges, present the draft schedule of fees and charges, which again is included in the papers. So that's at Appendix 2. So at this point, I'll hand back to you, Chair. Officers will be able to assist in terms of any questions. And then, like I said, Michael and I will provide a summary at the appropriate point before you consider how you would want to present the issues back to Strategy, Resource and Performance. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Frank. Members, before we sort of open up, we have three things that we need to think about, which is to consider and scrutinise the proposals relevant to this committee that we've got ahead of ourselves, recommend any changes, and receive the fees and charges schedule. So please do bear all of those items in mind as we go through here. Councillor Seif, I think you're first.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may, and both of which you did refer to in your presentation. Probably the easiest one, I think, is trading standards, and you already indicated that the details have yet to emerge. But can I just ask, what is involved? Are you going to be? Are we intending to take on more staff? Do we have to move to an additional property, or will it be housed here? What's involved in the estimates that you've provided here? I think it was 87,000, and I mean, presumably they will carry out all exactly the same functions as they carried out in the joint administration with Peterborough. So it's just what's involved in the 87. How confident are we that that will materialise? And well, I'll ask the second question after that, if I may.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. So as I've outlined, so it's been run as effectively where we've delegated the responsibility to Peterborough. So Peterborough running the services on behalf of both authorities. However, because the businesses and the other service users are in Cambridgeshire, the staff, although they're Peterborough employees, the vast majority of them are actually being accommodated within Cambridgeshire. So there are no additional accommodation costs because they're already using offices that we have within our estate. So that's one element of it. What we have been getting is information from Peterborough around the number of colleagues who would be affected by what's called the transfer undertakings and protection of employment regulations. So we have an understanding of those that are in the ring fence for those who would transfer to Cambridgeshire. So we therefore know which individuals are likely to be coming over. But of course, the other thing is, whilst it's been a shared arrangement, we have been covering the cost of the service from our base budget. So we also know that the salary costs are covered from our base budget. Where the unknowns come from, first of all, it's more about leadership and management, because that has been provided by Peterborough. So within the base budget, we have put an additional senior management post in. So we have covered that in the base budget. but there may be certain roles, because of training standards has certain very specific specialisms, that you may have to double up because you haven't got a shared arrangement any longer. We may find ourselves that we need to recruit either an individual or procure a specialist service in, because we're no longer in a shared arrangement. And that's why we've therefore identified that as a risk at this stage and put a provision in there. But as soon as we have by the end of March, we'll have full transparency on that. And if we have got further additional costs, I think the first thing is the directorate would make adjustments within its existing budget and seek to absorb that rather than highlighting that as a net pressure. But that's where we're at. But it is a risk that I do need to make sure members are aware of at this stage.
It's not likely to.
Have I answered
You're
the question?
suggesting it's not likely to be a material or substantial risk. We will have to have a new head of department if necessary, and a couple of specialists if we haven't got them.
Yeah, I think they're risks. I think we've got as much visibility on the finances as we possibly can at this stage. If it were to manifest, I don't think it's a material significant risk, but it's still a risk, that a potentially unfunded risk. So just to be really clear. Is that clear, Councillor Steve? Yeah.
Can I go to my second question?
Can I just jump in first on that? Obviously, we have mention of the fact that we need new software to enable the trading standards to operate. To what extent is there any risk of that not being in place ready for the start, for when they are purely Cambridgeshire? And are we certain that that is going to be, it's not going to cause any issues?
Okay, Chair. So 2 points around that is that the current core case management system that trading standards use, which is Peterborough's system, needs to be replaced in any event anyway. It's come to a point of life expiry. Notwithstanding that, we have a draft data sharing agreement and a memorandum of understanding in place, which we're in finalising. So in the first stage of the transition, we'll effectively, as Cambridge County Council, have access to the same system. And we have just started a procurement to replace the core system, which will be delivered this year. So we'll have a contingency plan where we'll share the existing system until such point we've got the replacement system in place. So we've got a contingency plan in place. The cost of that is covered within this business plan. It is outlined as being a cost of £215,000 to do that procurement, and elsewhere you'll see there's a cost, and there's also a funding source. A specific reserve has been allocated to fund the cost of that replacement system. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Many thanks for that.
I should have actually asked.
Back to you.
What the sharing arrangement is in terms of costs between Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. Presumably Cambridgeshire had the lion's share of the work up until now. So I'm assuming the share wasn't 50-50, and that has been taken into account, that is the workload that will fall on Cambridgeshire.
Yeah, so again, to follow up on that, so the funding basis has been, of the total cost, 70% County Council, 30% Peterborough. And that's basically the basis that we're working on, disaggregating the budgets back. Yeah, okay.
If I just quickly move to the second question, which is the Resilience Fund. With HAF, it was pretty well a pass-through, wasn't it? It was very, very specific, support for families in need. As I understand it, but I certainly don't know the details, the Resilience Fund is going to have different objectives, good objectives, preventative work and anti-poverty work. But again, can we, question here is, are they looking for some sort of match funding on the grant that's being given to us? I mean, will that all the Resilience Fund pass through, or we're expected to spend what we receive, or will we have to add to it? And are there any additional costs?
Thank you, Councillor Steve. So yes, you are correct. It is different to the Household Support Fund. The official guidance was published this week, so we are now working through the detail of all of those criteria with Nikita Vanterpool, who you'll be familiar with, leading on that work. In terms of match funding, we don't need to. So the full allocation, which will be £5.3 million for Cambridgeshire County Council, will be available for us to spend. And on the forward plan, you will see that there is a paper that's due actually here at committee next month for us to begin that process. And that's us looking at a tracker that will support the identification of vulnerable families across Cambridgeshire. So it allows us to collaborate far more closely with our partners at the district councils and the voluntary sector to become preventative rather than reactive in terms of that payment to communities.
Thank you for those questions. Councillor Bradnam, I think you were next on my list.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to just turn our attention to the...
Can you bring the microphone a little bit closer to you, please?
Yep, so sure. Is that better? Thank you. I just wanted to draw our attention to the comment that Frank made and the reference in table 3.2 about restructuring roles in various things, including libraries. And I just wanted to check whether the management of the budget for libraries is likely to result in any closures of library buildings or reduction in the mobile library service or reduction in hours of service at libraries or loss of support to the library access points.
So if I could just add to that one, and obviously the mobile library is in need of a replacement vehicle, so perhaps you could cover all of that at the same time. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bradnam, for the question. So in one word, no, it isn't linked to library closures or a reduction in service. And it's not specifically necessarily linked to libraries either. So we will be reviewing the structures of services that sit within my areas across the board. And this is something that we're doing across the whole council to make sure that we are aligning with our organisation design principles. So that really is about the layers in a hierarchy and the spans of control and responsibility that individual officers have. So we'll be conducting that and creating a saving because we know that in certain areas our layers are stacked and that perhaps we could restructure and do better and provide better value for money through those staffing arrangements. So that is what's proposed. In terms of a reduction of library or reduction of mobile libraries, no, it won't be linked to that. The mobile library and the capital spend, we did replace a vehicle in year last year. But we have got a proposal on the table for us to look at a longer term procurement and replacement of one of the mobiles that's the eldest one. We've got a national bid at the moment that's in for half of the costs, and the remaining 50% of the costs is factored into the capital tables that are presented to you today.
Many thanks for that response. And obviously, I think, certainly for an awful lot of us, the libraries are an incredibly important resource, and I think that I would like to emphasise the importance that we see for them as being a community resource rather than just a depository of books. Councillor Hoy.
Can I come back briefly, Chair? Sorry, it was just to say.
Sorry.
Thank you. That's why I asked the question. That I was, I appreciate we need to make savings, but this is the libraries. We're increasingly using them as a location that people can come to for all sorts of county council advice, and they're incredibly valuable, which is why I asked about the support for library access points as well, because these are more informal, often manned by volunteers, but the library supports them through communication and support of their IT networks and that sort of thing. So I'm very glad to hear there'll be no loss in that service, which is so important for our residents. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me come back.
Councillor Hoy, over to you.
That's okay, thank you. It was just back on the trading standards thing. I think it's quite good that it's coming back in-house, because I think that we haven't perhaps been as good as we could be with trading standards. I know there's a lot of issues. I know they do have some action days, but I'm still having a lot of people reporting illegal medication being sold, vapes being sold to 14 and 15-year-olds. There's a lot happening. I think it's a big area of work. So I think it'd be really good if we could perhaps invest in this. So hopefully coming back will be a kind of a start to that. But just on that, is there any value in us perhaps trying to work more with the districts? I know we do with the licensing teams, and I know they do have joint visits, but if they were perhaps based in there, I know we were talking about in the past about kind of hub and spoke models, but if they were based in the districts, perhaps they would kind of have that intelligence, because obviously what's happening in one area isn't going to be the same as what's happening in another area.
Chair, could I suggest that the service director responsible for training centre, Peter Gell, comes forward, because just outlines what we do with partners currently in terms of actions that we take around trains, because there is activity already with districts and with other agencies such as police and public health. Yeah, thank you. Peter, is that
Peter,
okay? Yeah.
over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, good question. There are some key areas that we do work really closely with the districts, and licensing is one of those. Food standards, food safety is another one of those areas. But outside of that, what we look at and what environmental health and those sort of regulatory functions within districts look at are very, very different indeed. So there is only limited crossover. The spectrum of trading standards is huge. You know, 1 minute it's animal welfare, it could be weights and measures, could be safety of consumer products, it could be underage sales, it could be safety of petrol sites. So what we don't have are the sufficient numbers of resource to be able to base individuals out in localities to that extent, because we haven't got the various breadth of the remit covered. So there are key areas where we do need to work collaboratively to them, and I think there's always opportunities to build and develop that. There's a lot of work as well we can do increasingly with public health in relation to the health aspects around some of these things that we investigate. A lot of the bodies as well, if you're talking about vapes, is a good example at the moment, very topical issue. Work closely with the police, the HMRC and other government departments on that, and often what happens is some of those operations bring in national regulators and their input and their intel as well. So the intel and information is really important, as you say, because that helps us identify those priority areas that we need to put those interventions into. And we do have quite a good understanding about where some of those hotspots are across Cambridgeshire. So about going forward. And one of the steers, once you've got your own service post-April, is amongst the breadth of the training standards remit, where are the priorities for this committee of the local authority we want to put some of those resources into? Some things we have a level of control over, some things national regulators say this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it. So what it's about helping to give you the information and helping you then to steer the direction of the service.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So obviously it is a bit of a resourcing issue at the moment, and obviously it's not going to be solved overnight, but personally I would like to see us focus on that a bit more going forward and maybe looking at resourcing for that, because I know it kind of doesn't seem very exciting sometimes, trading standards, but like you say, there are those public health implications, aren't there? If people are buying medications on the black market, they could actually make themselves very unwell or die in the worst case scenario. So that is something that is, quite scary. And I do think we need to perhaps think about investing a little bit more into it.
I think, from my point of view, it's certainly an area that I would like us to look at in more detail, once everything has kind of settled from this kind of disruptive point. So I think it's something to be brought back in the future. But Lisa?
Thank you. Just to echo that, I think as we look at the transfer of the service back in and the planning that goes on around the service, we can really focus in on that place-based operation. So I think that Councillor Hoyt is correct. By bringing it back in-house, it allows us to move that resource around and to really develop those links with the districts and city councils even further, and especially as we run up to LGR as well.
Indeed. Okay. So Councillor Bulatz.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions. One is more overarching on inequality and poverty, but 2 are more specific on budget lines. So probably, should I ask the first one, like the overarching one first, and then maybe, because I wasn't sure if we go into the more detailed questions later on. So on poverty and inequality, I do notice the change a bit in the wording, and I actually welcome the focus on building long-term financial stability and targeted interventions in the wording of the new ambition. Of course, I noticed there's no more mention of inequality specifically, but I really hope, and I'm sure this doesn't mean loss of the focus on inequality, because especially being on health scrutiny committees, I really see the impact of inequalities in health that obviously impact the prevention deprivation, poverty, and so on. So I do welcome that and some of the investment in citizens' advice as well going forward, because the work over the previous years really has shown how that kind of investment that can seem quite small in the grand scheme of the budget could really work to maximize income. But my question is related to the Crisis and Resilience Fund again, and this is overlaps with CYP, but I did notice we don't plan to continue the holiday vouchers because obviously those are funded through the Household Support Fund. And to me, it's not really clear whether the Crisis Resilience Fund will allow something like that or not, because I haven't seen the guidance that Lisa mentioned that was published quite recently. So I wasn't sure if you're saying it's not possible to fund, not necessarily the same thing, but something around supporting children, because to me that is prevention, whether it's in the same form or not. I was just looking for some clarification whether that's completely off the table with the new fund, or can still look at some support for children which could prevent issues later on in life.
So I think the guidance was publicly published 2 days ago, and I did start going through it and looking at some of the stuff, but it's far too early. I don't know whether the officers have any more detail that they're able to share. So over to Frank.
So I think the first thing within the draft business plans I've outlined in the presentation, there's the £1.7 million, and then there's the Crisis Resilience Fund as well. So I think the first thing, I don't think it's necessarily a direct replacement, a direct match for what the Household Support Fund and the holiday voucher scheme. However, what we're really trying to look at is actually trying to get upstream. First of all, trying to make sure we support families to maximise the income that they can secure, but also get into more preventative space, so there isn't a need for those types of interventions. So that's the broad headlines at this stage, and as Lisa's outlined, we're working through the process, and we'll bring more detailed proposals to the committee before we plan to discharge that funding. But Lisa, do you want to add any further to that?
Thank you. So yeah, we won't be able to do a like-for-like replacement of the food vouchers through the Crisis and Resilience Fund. We do know that much. But my understanding is that there is still some provision for emergency situations, but that would not be a blanket approach throughout the whole year. But what you will also note from this paper is a proposal to invest an additional £100,000 directly into support for the families that are likely to be affected by this, and for us to passport that further through into citizens' advice so that we can do even more work in targeting those individuals. And the family tracker that I mentioned earlier, and investing in that will allow us to actually identify those people who perhaps are missing out on benefits, or who are missing out on other opportunities. And I think linking across to CYP committee, although we're obviously not in Children's Committee, it's the opportunities that the holidays and food programme actually provides, and the expansion in that space. So I think there's a lot more that we can do. Yeah.
I think my thought on that was how it will impact services within this committee if we're not to do that anymore as well, thinking about the implications on perhaps demand on other services. So that's something perhaps for a future paper or committee discussion, because I assume that the details won't be ready on time before we actually discuss full council budget. The second thing I want to ask is around, of course, the use of reserves we have approved, 2 years ago, to use on the migration and partnerships work, which was really instrumental in obviously becoming a county of sanctuary, and some of the work around that. Obviously, this was agreed until it still continues this coming year, and then that ends. My kind of more strategic question is, how would that impact not finding something to replace that actually impact on what we're delivering at the moment? And obviously the county being a county of sanctuary and the expectation that we'll do some work, will this be absorbed in other areas of the service? Do we think it's not needed anymore, or we simply can't find other reserves or funds for that?
Thank you, Chair. So on the role that you refer to, we have been liaising with finance colleagues in the run-up to presenting these papers to you today, and there is enough of an underspend that's been built up in the reserve, specifically within the community service, that will continue that role right the way through the following year. So it's not a risk, and the post will remain.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for the clarification. And well, finally, be pleased to know my final so far question is around on the charges. So there was some wording around the meeting room costs for some meeting rooms actually decreasing. I think I'm trying to find the reference exactly in the table, but there was the bigger questions around we're saying we want to encourage more use. So I was wondering, what do we actually have the evidence that reducing it by a bit would actually allow more use? Like how much the cost of those meeting rooms is actually a barrier. So I'm trying to find the exact reference, but there were a few of them that were planning to slightly reduce on the library meeting rooms. Yeah, so I think it's on 63, but I'm happy to get the response a bit later. I know it's like a very big table.
We're going to say we'll take that up again in a moment. Okay, in which case we'll go over to Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just if you allow me just to make one small sort of personal pet peeve of mine. Well, I do spend a lot of time in our libraries, particularly the Huntingdon one, which is run superbly. And the team go above and beyond the call of duty. But I noticed they don't have any daily newspapers anymore, national newspapers, that is. And I know some people have said to me they're sort of disappointed in that. They like to read them, as indeed do I at times. So I just wondered if there's anything in place just to see how that's affected footfall into the libraries, if there's something we can restore. I understand that budgets are tight. But I think generally, the budget is very good, and it's protecting a lot of the anti-poverty work that's gone on, and all that hard work that took place over the previous 4 years is now continuing. So I see that very much as a positive. I'd love to know more about the family tracker. I think Lisa's absolutely correct that people don't always appreciate or understand what they're entitled to. And a number of times we'll do casework, people will come to us and actually you can signpost them and they'll then be able to help themselves, if you like. We did some quite successful pilot projects a couple of years ago around the county, and it was mainly sort of on the theme of, we'll help you, if you've got arrears on your council tax, for example, we can help you with that, but you need to sign up and complete some training, get some of those key skills. So I wondered if we could sort of build on that and the examples that we took. I think it was Jill Buckingham that came to see us and gave a very comprehensive report and an update. And yeah, I thought it was very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. So I think the question is linked to the provision of newspapers in libraries and a decision that was taken in November last year. That was one that I need to stress was not taken lightly, but it was a decision to end the provision of printed newspapers in our libraries. So just to confirm, they were available in 7 out of our 33 permanent sites across the county. And as we introduced tighter controls of our finances across the council, this was something that we reviewed. As part of that review, we spoke to neighbouring library services in Peterborough, Norfolk and Suffolk, who confirmed that they had already withdrawn the provision of printed stock. Many library services decided not to actually reintroduce them after COVID. Subsequently, we've also spoken to national library services. We put a call out nationally to see the picture, and we were one of few outliers who were still providing that. Just some data for you as context. The provision of printed stock, we were down to less than a dozen people a day actually accessing them. And it just felt that it wasn't great value for money anymore, although we recognise that it's a really important resource. We have, however, invested and continue to invest in a resource called Press Reader, which allows people online access to newspapers. And that actually is a far wider range of papers that we were available to provide printed. So that's our rationale for the decision that was taken in year and that will continue in the future.
Yeah, just briefly, I just wondered, don't have to answer now, Lisa, but how you sort of monitor how many people are reading the local papers, because my own sort of experience is people just come in and they might, glance or whatever, and put them back or put them to another part of the library or something. I'm not sure how we could track the success or otherwise of that, but I do recognise the technology has moved on. It's the sort of printed version. I suspect probably in 10 years' time we won't have printed newspapers on sale anywhere.
Thank you. So the information that the service have provided me is that they check in and out the takes of the newspapers. So that's the information that they derive the numbers from.
And I think, obviously we will see that some people will be coming to us and making comment around that. And I gather we will collate the data that comes in around people who are disappointed about this to see if it is a major problem. Thank you for that. Right, Councillor Damari Hellman. Sorry.
Answer to my question about could we continue some of the pilot projects we did a couple of years ago? Perhaps not exactly the same ones. Is there any scope for that at all?
That's okay. Thank you. So the pilots, I think you're referring to the Close to Communities work. So much of that work has become mainstreamed, and some of the projects have really flown since then. So things like the place-based meetings, the place-based budgets are something that continue to this day. We could certainly bring a report back into Spokes about some of those updates. I think it also sits alongside some of the proposals that have gone into the LGR paper, linking to our place-based approach and structures. So we can certainly, with Chair and Vice Chair, revisit how best to present that up-to-date information to the committee.
Sorry, can I just clarify? You're talking about the community fund projects, or
Lisa got the title correct. It's the Closer to Communities projects that we did. I think there were about 6 or 7 of them. But no, it'd be good to we'll update. Get an update soon, I understand. Thank you.
Because I know we're looking at this budget, but I was going to ask if there's any scope to reintroduce the community. I can't remember what we called it, actually. What did we call it? Sorry, community fund. Well, we had £1.5 million small projects, which were extremely successful, and really seems to me goes to the heart of what this committee is about and should be doing. We do many things, but that's something I know we can't produce a wish list, but I think really that's something that was very successful, and we should look for one day to try and introduce it. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point.
Indeed, I think that there have been some very successful projects come through from there. I think a lot of them have actually taken quite a lot of time to get through the system. At this stage, I'm slightly nervous about committing to trying to find money at a time when things are very difficult with LGR on our horizon. But it's certainly one thing that I do keep mentioning, and we keep open to if there is money to do it. Lisa, do you want to? Frank?
I was just going to suggest that perhaps in the summer we can just note the previous success of that fund, but also noting the affordability issues that we got as a council. So it can be reflected from the committee to SRMP. If there were a means to be able to provide that sort of fund, then of course that could be considered. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to reflect that in what we're saying while acknowledging the challenges that it actually exists there. Okay, thank you. So over to Councillor Damari Hellman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start off with a broad just overview on this budget. I've been quite satisfied with what we've seen. Obviously, myself and the Chair have been going into this into depth for quite a while. There are lots of areas that we could discuss. I think one of the most important things is libraries. I appreciate Councillor Braddon has already raised comments there. I'm really pleased to see how we're protecting our libraries. We're protecting our buildings, we're protecting our staff, and we're protecting the services they provide on the whole. To lose the newspapers is a shame, and to have our inflationary freeze on our stock is also ideal world. We wouldn't like to be doing these things, but we are where we are. We're finding savings whilst really preserving the most important parts of our libraries, which is as a community hub and just a great resource for us as a council to outreach to our residents and provide support. So generally with this budget, I'm in support of what we've proposed or what is proposed in the papers. My big question coming into this budget period was obviously the CRF and how that is going to look. 2 days hasn't been very long to digest any of that, but maybe for the sake of the committee, I'll just highlight the 3 outcomes that the government list in their guidance. So outcome 1 for them is provision of effective crisis support. Outcome number 2 is improving individuals' financial resilience, and outcome 3 is bolstering the local level support landscape. As for outcomes 2 and 3, I feel we've been working very hard on these things. The work of the Poverty Strategy Commission has been fantastic here. I think the thing that makes me most nervous, perhaps, is the crisis support element, given that the fund allows for individuals to apply for individual crisis payments, which is there. I think there's a level of similarity with the Household Support Fund there, but a very, very tenuous one. And the new fund is completely changing criteria, etc. And I was wondering if, Lisa, could you give us an outline of any early insights we might have into how that might look? And particularly, I think, because it's individual requests, it's going to be quite demand-led, the crisis support. What are measures to be resilient to those challenges may be? Appreciating that this is very early doors, we're all still digesting it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite okay. So the plan. I think that we will, as we move towards Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at the end of the month, we will be able to provide something far more detailed for consideration there. But just as a starter for you, really, I've mentioned the platform, which is really important to us. We will need to firm up resource in this area to actually deliver. We've got Nikita's role at the moment, and we want to expand the resource so that we can cover off some of the recommendations from the Poverty Commission. So, for example, the Voice of Residents, it was something that we commissioned, we outsourced last time. We really want to do that in-house so that we can connect it across all of our directorates and really use that appreciative inquiry approach that we know works really well with our residents. So that's something else that we'd like to see happen. We've got things like the local assistance scheme that we will need to recommission. So that's people's access to things like food vouchers in an emergency. It's things like white goods as well. So that's something that will be coming up later this year. I believe at the moment it's penciled in for committee in June to restart that procurement process. Something that's really critical to this, and I think it touches on your point of that, those emergency payment type things, is that in the main, our district and city council partners are really critical to this. They operate housing stock, obviously, for us. They deal with people who are presenting as homeless, but they also deal with benefits and revenues there. So we are working with them at the moment for them to come forward with ideas and proposals to us by the middle of February so that we can make sure that we are also passporting funding to them where they are best placed to deliver it to communities. You will see that we will start to bring forward proposals around things like the food security fund and really pushing that prevention angle. But yes, not forgetting that there will be people in crisis that we need to keep an eye on as well.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Again, very early doors, so I look forward to more information coming out. I think my last point will just be a little bit of a request with this fund. I appreciate that support. I note that support for those suffering domestic abuse is one of the considerations for the fund, and notwithstanding White Ribbon Ambassador status, but it's a really important issue to me, and I would welcome some more information as and when it's ready on what we can do to support that particular side.
Just to respond to that point on domestic abuse, yeah, absolutely critical. I think Julia's in the room today with us, the head of service. And just to let you know that really through Household Support Fund, what we've been able to do is strengthen those arrangements between the services delivering that crisis funding and the domestic abuse team. So we've been able to really home in on the people that need that support most, join up, and we've actually been able to transfer some of the budget across to Julia's service, but also to services like Housing First, so that we're really getting the support to those that need it. And that also has extended into things like our care leaver provision as well.
Certainly, I would like to emphasize the importance I see in actually looking at that, those people who are suffering from domestic abuse and the work that we can actually do to make sure that those people are supported and able, to really improve the chances of people being able to exit
Thank you. Okay, so yes, I've now had an opportunity to look at page 63 of the table as well. So just to confirm, this the reductions that are proposed, it's on smaller, it's on our larger rooms where we have proposed a reduction of the commercial rate in some areas, and that's where there was a drop off of bookings. So it's to encourage those bookings, and it's also been done after a local comparison to other options and research by the service. Thank you.
Please just bear with us while the chair has a microphone issue sorted out. Thank you.
I will try and use that one since, is mine back now? Yes. Good. That's the only problem with all of this technology, isn't it? Councillor Bradnam, did you come back with something else you wanted?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did want to ask. I'm looking at the vision that we have on, so this is the new draft vision, table 1.1 on page 16. And I just wanted to ask, it's under the section support a green and sustainable county. And we aim in our ambitions to create, let me just move the blob that's obscuring the text, create and connect green spaces, restore natural habitats on council land. And this is the bit I'm asking about, support community-led nature recovery projects. And I was just wondering how we envisage, not in detail, but in a broad sense, how we envisage being able to support community-led projects. Is that through, for example, direct grant funding, which would be applied for where applications would be made to the county council, or is that delivering the money to district councils so that they can then deliver that money out to local as a grant, with an application procedure?
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. I think that because this is the overall strategy for the whole council, I think that's an area for the EGI committee as opposed to this committee. So it's an overall position. So unless officers have anything else to say on that.
It had the word community in it, so I assumed it might come under this, but no, you're quite right, probably, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, nonetheless, you may get raised at Environment Green Investment, but as the Executive Director responsible, I can join the links up and provide you a response anyway. Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, but it's not strictly within the remit of this committee. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Members, any other points that you would like to raise? Anything else you'd like to bring up on this? If not, I'm going to hand it back over to Frank to summarise things. I think from my point of view, there are a couple of things that are really important, which comes down to the poverty strategy and the libraries, beyond anything else. The idea that we can actually do something to help those who are most in need. And that is irrespective of who they are, where they are, or anything else. It needs to be, the entire county that we are considering.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that's the two key headlines, isn't it? Feeding back from committee. So as the Vice Chair outlined, first of all, the importance of the protection of the library service, and obviously, and as you said, Chair, the importance of the approach that's outlined here around continuing to take forward the recommendations from the Anti-Poverty Commission and focus on those who most need support. So the other issues that we've got, first of all, was the questions and then the assurances we provided around the risks and assumptions around the investment for training standards, clarified that that's a risk but not a material risk. But what we also outlined is that once we have a standalone service and we may want to look at how we might want to further enhance and improve the service, that we could bring a report to committee in due course on training standards. There was a particular assurance and questions around the Crisis Resilience Fund, building on what you said at the beginning there, Chair, around the importance of the anti-poverty approach. But we also clarified that the guidance has just been released and it won't be a like-for-like replacement for the Household Support Fund, but there will still be ability for us to do similar types of activity which get to the same outcome. We did provide the assurance, again, as building on what I said at the beginning, that the proposals around the management and the service costs for libraries are not just focused on libraries, they're focused on all the services within the community resilience development division. But there would not be a reduction in library provision in terms of hours, closures, and we also clarified from Lisa clarified the efforts in terms of improving and replacing the mobile library function as well. Just looking further, just further clarified that the use of reserves on migration and partnerships and the impact on the County of Sanctuary. We clarified that this funding imposed for the officers would continue through 26-27. I think indeed there's actually funding in place until March 28 for that particular function as well. Clarified the issue around the fees issue in libraries, but actually I think it's a commercial decision to reduce the fees that will actually increase income because of usage patterns and competitors. We did clarify the issue around the use of newspapers in libraries, and actually the value for money perspective is around that. And point that was raised is that we feedback to committee that the success of the previous capital fund around the Community Development Fund, I think that was what it was called, that was successful, and if it would be possible to fund such a capital scheme in the future, that would be supported by the committee. But the committee also notes the affordability challenges of the authority. And the final thing is, I think it's come out, is that we have got the ring fence grant for domestic violence and abuse service, and that will be passported through to the service. And so again, we clarified how that will be used to support that service. So I think that is really the key issues. There's no key amendments or changes to the draft business plan. I think particularly it's more about seeking assurance about the delivery of things around the Crisis Resilience Fund, the anti-poverty strategy, and so you sought some technical assurance around some of the key services relating to this committee. Is that a fair summary, Chair? And obviously we can write this up for you as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm quite happy that that's that pretty well summarises what we've discussed this afternoon. And on that basis, thank you very much. And thank you for all the contributions we've had. We are being asked to consider and scrutinise the proposals relevant to this committee within the 26-29 business plan and budget put forward by Strategy, Resource and Performance Committee on the 11th of December, which I think we have done. Recommend changes and/or actions for consideration by Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at its meeting on 29th of January 2026 to enable a business plan and budget to be proposed to full council on 10th of February 2026. And I think that we have done that, and that's been succinctly summarised there for us. And finally, to receive the fees and charges schedule for this committee included Appendix 2, and I think we're happy to do that. Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Michael, for being here today. And we will then move on to item 5, Corporate Performance Report, which will be presented by Executive Director in Place and Sustainability, Frank Jordan. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you again, Chair. So Council's Corporate Performance Management Framework, that has been set by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, and that did allocate a number of key strategic performance indicators for each of the policy and service committees. And your role as a policy and service committee is to review the performance and consider whether performance is at the acceptable level, scrutinise and seek assurance around that, and also seek further information or actions required to improve performance. But what I also say when we present performance reports, it is also a good opportunity to highlight when things are going well, and perhaps you want to feed that back to officers as well. So this report provides an update on performance for 25-26 up to the end of Q2, so I think that's the end of September. And I think particular areas we'd highlight, noting what I'm saying around some areas of improved performance. So we've got some areas which are noted in the appendix around what RAG rated as green, so that's effectively meeting the targets or exceeding it. Particularly in registration services, we can confirm that we're meeting the requirement for birth and death registrations, which is a statutory time frame. But of course, both of those are very important life events for families, so it's important that we're actually able to meet that duty. And we do get a separate verification of the quality of the registration service from the national level. So we have had a recent review of that, and we get very good feedback around the way the registration service works. Another thing that has been a constant thing we've been seeking to improve again, a very, very significant issue for families that are affected by this is the number of live investigations that the coroner needs to undertake, and a significant reduction of the ones that are live that are taken over 12 months. Now, sometimes they do take a long period of time because some of those investigations are very complex and require very complex reports to be produced. But nonetheless, we've particularly been monitoring that because we know the impact that has on those who are bereaved. So that's an important improvement in our performance in relation to support to the coroner. And also particularly highlight the percentage of learners that have both been retained and those achieving their qualifications in the Education and Skills Service, and also highlighting the percentage of clients that are engaging with the Independent Domestic Violence Advocacy Service, again, a really important targeted service supporting those who are most vulnerable. There are some areas where we're also in the report that we've highlighted, there's some improvement plans to improve our level of performance, particularly around the number of active library users and the visits made to library sites. But notwithstanding that performance, it's still very much a valued service by many of our residents and communities. So that's the key highlights from the performance report, Chair. But again, officers will be happy to assist in any questions you may have and any challenges you may want to put to officers around performance. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. I think, first of all, I'd like to just highlight on there the 009 registrations, all deaths registered within 5 days, which of course was previously not green and has moved. And we actually had set out a path to green, and it is good to see that that path to green has been achieved and has given us what we expected. So I'd like to pass on my thanks to the officers concerned for that work. Members, questions? Comments? Everyone talked out from the previous session, I think. So, Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I hope on the right item here. I'm just looking at the number of youth and community organisations supported with initial seed funding, and that has been a significant reduction suggested for 2025-26. I'm wondering whether that is lack of demand or lack of capacity. I'm looking at page 90. As I say, I may be in the wrong section.
I think officers would like to take that as an action to come back with an answer to you on that one. Councillor Seif.
Thank you. This is not having a go, particularly at any individual service, but we don't have I don't know whether you can even develop sensible KPIs, but we don't have anything on trading standards. Trading standards is pretty important, as we were discussing before, and indeed it's inimical to the health and safety of the community. And we don't have, I don't know what KPIs you would use, number of inspections, number of prosecutions. I don't know. I mean, there are quite a number of things that are covered by trading standards, which we don't know until we get the annual report.
Thank you, Chair. Noting Peter Giles coming up. So we do have beneath what we call the strategic scorecards, clearly we have operational scorecards that officers review, and we do have a number of key metrics relating to training standards. So there are measures. Peter could outline what those are, but in terms of reviewing the overall performance management framework, given what I've said around training standards also becoming a standalone service for the county, that could be something that's built into this framework for this committee going forward as well. But Peter, could you just outline what the key indicators that you use from an operational perspective, please? Thank you.
Yes, there are a number of measures that we record, and again, a number of national regulators require us to report on an annual basis. So there'll be information in relation to the services that we delivered in respect of animal health and welfare. We report that annually to DEFRA. Again, in relation to our safety of sports grounds, we've got an audit due next year, and again, that will provide assurance in relation to the audit that they carry out, and we meet on a regular basis with them. The Food Standards Agency oversee the food standards delivery, and again, we're expecting an audit next year. So those are very specific things that external bodies come in and will look at the services that we deliver and provide quite a comprehensive view as to the services that are delivered, that any areas for improvement of which we then, as you would with an audit, provide a response to that. Because of the diverse nature of the services that we provide, other than the surveys that we talked about earlier in relation to the satisfaction across the county, that gives a general perspective of the view of the service, and there was a 5% uplift in satisfaction this last year in relation to that. So that's an overall arching view, but in relation to the individual elements, because we're so diverse, again, it's been challenging to find an individual indicator that really gives you a sense for how the service is doing other than that general customer satisfaction. So things like response times clear and managed, any complaints. Again, we have corporate processes in relation to that, but I'm very happy to work with sort of chair and vice chairs and spokes to develop those measures that really work for this team. So as Frank has sort of alluded to, at a departmental level, we do look at a lot of the data. Prosecutions, again, enforcement action, the whole range of sanctions that we have now, a lot of the new legislation that comes into place has a whole toolbox, if you like, from sort of notices, formal warnings, formal cautions, prosecutions, fines. So actually, again, individually, the numbers, it's the outcome that's important. So have we achieved compliance? Has that been achieved? Ideally for advice and information and supporting businesses, and the majority of businesses want to get things right, and it's just around helping them to achieve that. So you don't necessarily get the sanctions at the end of it. One of the measures that we do record, though it hasn't been reported, but we do look at this from a departmental perspective, is a general compliance figure across the businesses and how long it takes to secure compliance with those businesses. Now, again, depending on the nature of the work, so inspection-led can be some of it can be using the intelligence to respond to complaints. So we heard earlier in relation to some of the concerns in relation to sort of vape sales in parts of the Cambridgeshire. So again, that would be intelligence-led work, and if the intelligence is good, the initial compliance is going to be poor in relation to those businesses until we've taken relevant action to bring them into compliance. So very happy to take ideas and views this are outsiders to things that you'd like us to report specifically on. And again, very keen to work through chair, etc., in order to develop those. But we do report on quite a lot locally, and when we get the national audits, that's something that needs to be shared with the committee, so you know how those services are doing for your own reassurance.
I did put you on the spot there, and you've given me a very, very comprehensive answer. So thank you very much for that. And of course, we get the annual report, which we then question you on the various aspects. Of course, you know that I have a particular interest in one aspect of it, but I'll save my question for when you present your report. But it's good. I mean, I think that if we can have some stats in future, I think that will be help understanding as to the performance of that particular service. So thank you very much.
Yes, agree with that. Thank you very much, Peter, for that. And I think, you know, we hear that obviously there is information or there is data there to support these things. So we will look, or as Trading Standards is sort of fully onboarded, let's have a look at that and see what we can do. Okay. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Isn't it just the way that just when you are called, your screen does something funny? Okay, so I'm looking at the indicator 005 on page 88, and I note the reduction in, which is total number of people supported through the safe accommodation strategy. And I note the reduction in quarters 1 and 2 in the number of people supported through this strategy. And I appreciate the commentary, which notes an increase in the use of the Household Support Fund, which might have caused a reduction in the need for people to use this service. But I hope it doesn't mean that people who need our help are either reluctant to contact us or are finding it harder to seek out our help, or maybe it's just a seasonal variation. So I just wondered if you could give us some narrative around that, please.
Julie, do you want to answer for us, please?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the question. So some of that variation was some errors in reporting last year, which make it look like there's a reduction when there actually isn't. And the vast majority of that is linked to our decoupling of services across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and where we were previously reporting on services that also worked across Peterborough, we're now solely concentrating on those services that work across Cambridgeshire. So that's the overarching reason where you see those small sort of differences in those numbers. But please be reassured, all the services that we've got are still there, they're still operating, and they're still reaching all the people that they need to reach. So we still have consistent services there.
That's great. Thank you very much for that reassurance.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Councillor Tong.
Good afternoon. I wanted to ask a question about the visits to library sites. I think our library service is absolutely fantastic. It's understandable. We've had a bit of a knock in performance given the difficulties a number of library sites have faced. I wanted to ask, at some of the sites that have closed, have we seen uptick, return to usual? Because I imagine we have, but I think that would be quite reassuring. Another thing that I wanted to ask about is the fact that attendance to some of the outreach events isn't really monitored. And I feel this is a little bit of a missed opportunity because, as is acknowledged in the commentary, we had really good attendance for our summer reading challenge, which I think is, it's great. It's a really valuable event. And I think it really does get kids passionate about reading, passionate about visiting our libraries. So I was wondering if we could do any measurement of engagement at this sort of outreach, because I feel that, well, it is important to monitor, and it, if anything, just shows what a good job we're doing.
Lisa. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Tong. So in terms of the recovery, really, when sites reopen, yes, we're seeing really strong recovery. Cherry Hinton is a brilliant example of that. But I think rather than me just telling you that, what I will do is ask the service to provide a briefing note just so that you can see some of the data that sits behind it in more detail for that further reassurance. In terms of the engagement at outreach, I think it makes best sense for me to ask them to include that in a briefing note as well. And some of the thinking around what we can do moving forwards. You are right, we do track the Summer Reading Challenge very carefully. We have all of the specific numbers there. So what more can we do in that space? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Quite happy with that one. I have no one else with any questions here, so we are being asked to scrutinise and comment on the performance information presented, and I think we have done that. So thank you very much, committee. Move on to item 6. The next item is Financial Monitoring Report for October 2025, which will be presented by the Executive Director and Place and Sustainability, Frank Jordan, and the Strategic Finance and Business Partner, Becky Bartram, is here to support with any financial queries. Over to you, Frank.
I think it's Claire who's here to support rather than Becky. Yeah, so no, it's not a problem. So very briefly, so the report presents the committee with the financial monitoring information, again, up to the end of October 2026. I think the particular thing I would just ask the committee to note is that from June 25, we've had financial monitoring reports that we've been presenting to members of all committees, including Strategy Resource Performance, of a significant overspend across all services. And at the latest formal forecast that was presented to Strategy Resources Performance, that overspend was still at 10.8 million, having reduced from a previous forecast of nearly 15 million in June. And as a result of that, all executive directors and all services from July onwards were asked to take management action across all of our directorates to bring expenditure down. So this report provides an update on the forecast as I say, October, which shows an underspend of just over 620,000, and that's through that direct management action that's needed to be taken to make a contribution overall so that we can aim to get to a balanced budget position as a council. So I think that's probably just the key thing we'd highlight. So therefore, just to note, there is an underspend, but I've outlined the core reason why that's the case. But again, if members want to ask questions about any of the specific lines, then again we can provide that response and that assurance. So that was the key thing I really wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And I think it's important to realise that this is not a permanent reduction we're talking about here. A lot of this is just in-year savings that are likely to return in the following year. Members, questions, comments? Councillor Sif.
Can always be relied on to ask a question. The 320,000 underspent on community services, which was, I believe, was additional monies coming in from the Ukrainian support fund, wasn't it? And I want to ask the leading question: was this planned or was this fortuitous? I mean, how do you plan to get additional monies? Because the spend budget's pretty well the same.
Thank you, Councillor Sif. So, no, at the start of the year, alongside finance colleagues, we put in an indicative amount for what we thought we might expect from income from the Homes for Ukraine tariff. It is all dependent still on how many people are moving to the UK from Ukraine. So we don't really have any solid way of knowing whether that will carry on, how many will arrive, or what might happen next in that space. So yes, we received more income than we were expecting, and obviously we've been able to offer that directly up as a saving to the council.
We provided the same level of service. I mean, supported the same number of people. Yes.
Yeah, it's basically a tariff that we receive. So we get money in for various things, and some of it's transported immediately to the district councils who do the majority of the work in this space. But ours was already covered. So in the budget paper that you saw earlier, where we've got the investment in things like the County of Sanctuary, the migration roles, all of that was already covered off. So anything extra we were able to offer up as a saving to support the wider organisation.
I think that's the important thing, is that we're actually delivering the services without costing the council, as it were, as a result of that. Members, any other questions on here? Any other points? Councillor Bradnam?
Thank you. Just it's just an administrative observation. It would be really helpful if on this table it was clear if all of these tables relate to this committee's consideration, and whether there are bits that should not be looked at because they're under a different budget heading. I don't know if I'm just not reading the tables correctly, but I just wondered if that could be made more obvious. Because, for example, at the top of page 98, we've got a little bit of place and sustainability regulatory services, which is obviously coming into our service. But I just wondered whether all of this relates to this committee.
So I think I can actually say that, yes, it does. And what it is because up until now, or up until this year, everything has been split between two different services. Now that everything has been reorganised, everything will fall under place and sustainability in next year. So hence we're taking bits out of different services to present here, and this is the consolidated part that you're seeing.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Members, any other points? If not, we're being asked to note the report. So the final item today is the committee's agenda plan. Are there any comments or questions from members or officers? Councillor Damari Holman.
It's perhaps less for our agenda plan, but the training standards restructure is obviously something that we've discussed quite a lot today. Would it be possible to arrange some sort of briefing for members, something for the agenda? And then I'm wondering if following the briefing of the restructure as a committee, we can look at KPIs, feeling better informed as to how things look.
So I think I would be quite happy for us to do that. It's all right. I was just delaying because I was just looking at dates here and thinking we obviously need to give a little bit of time for this to settle in. But if we could probably be looking at around about June before we could look, or the June meeting before we could think of bringing anything to committee, although we may be able to do informal briefings in between. Councillor Seif?
Not on. I am on now. I've forgotten what we thought we were going to do as regards the Library Presents. They would like to tell us all about what they're doing, and I think this committee would benefit from knowing what they're doing and support them. I think everybody, I won't go into what it does for the moment, but it's basically presentations in the libraries, entertainment broadly for all age groups and all diverse community groups. And I can't remember what we said we were going to do. Were they going to do a presentation online, or would we have them come to present?
What we will do is initially bring that to spokes meetings, and then if we think that there's something for all members, we will then put a presentation to all members. Hopefully we can then encourage even more people to book the tickets so that they sell out even quicker.
Chair, is that what's implied under the 25th of June item, future library strategy, or is that different?
No, that's a different thing. That's where we've already talked about some of looking at the libraries and everything and making sure that we have a sustainable library service that will continue to deliver at least as much as it is into the future.
Good.
Okay, members. So no more comments or questions on that, on the forward agenda plan. Then our next meeting is scheduled for the 26th of February. Are you here still then? So I would like to welcome Frank Jordan to his first and last meeting. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions today. I think they've been very valuable. Thank you.